Education is for life, for living. To live a meaningful, healthy life, we need to know reality. We need to know the truth, the unchanging Sanatana, so that we can lead a life in alignment with that reality, with truth. Education must help us in this.
The Itihasa is the thing which narrates how to live our life. If you read Mahabharata, your perception will be very clear. You will become a jnani, not simply poet. There will be no story in this world without the Mahabharata Itihasa, because it includes each and everything of the life.
Namaskara to all the guests and the hosts, Udhbhavaha and Param Foundation, and we have few people from Purna Pramati school also. So every time I think when we think of Narayanacharya Sammana Sabha and Literature Festival, I think the first question everybody feels is, why are we doing it? Why is Udhbhavaha doing it? I think Sahitya Prakashana and Subhu publication is an obvious thing, because they have been Narayanacharya's publishers for more than 30-35 years now. Why is Udhbhavaha doing this? Because I think it is very clear for us that Udhbhavaha is because Narayanacharya was our major inspiration. So without Narayanacharya, we can't even think of the journey of Udhbhavaha. So that is the first context. That is the first context which we wanted to say, that because Narayanacharya is our inspiration, a foundational inspiration for Udhbhavaha's journey. And there is a story which Narayanacharya always used to tell, that when he was professor of English at Dharwad, Karnataka College, Dharwad, there came a point where he used to suggest or give suggestions about Vedas and different things, and he also had a huge inspiration from Aurobindo. So from Aurobindo's readings and his personal sadhana, he used to talk about Vedas to people who are in the Sanskrit department, the students of Sanskrit department, and every time I think the question was, whatever you are saying, which book is it in? And why are you coming in between our journey? Is the Sanskrit scholars, the Sanskrit scholars of that college were saying that. And I think at one point of time, when Narayanacharya was discussing this with another great Rishi Sadrisha Kavi Shrestha Dara Bendre said, so you start publishing books, no? They're asking which book is this thing in, so you start publishing books. Narayanacharya said, I am a professor, I am not a publisher, I don't know how to do it. And he says that Bendre wrote a check to him. Bendre gave him significant money so that he can start publishing. So that is how Narayanacharya's publishing journey started. And since then, I think cumulatively he has written around 200 books. And on various topics, from Vedas to Ramayana. He was called Ramayanacharya and Mahabharata Acharya. So that, and thankfully we came in touch with this thing, and we got a lot of inspiration from, especially one book which has inspired most of us in Udhbhavaha is those 18 days. It is a story of 18 days Kurukshetra war, and I think it helps us navigate this life. So that is how we look at it. It is that inspiring for us. And after the Dehanta of Narayanacharya, when we were thinking how to, so this legacy has to continue. And what can we as an institution do about it? So when we were discussing this thing, I think with Ritvik and Subramanya ji, we were discussing that like how Bendre recognized Narayanacharya and said that you go, you do this thing. I think it is very important that we recognize scholars in the dharmic field. So that is how this idea of Narayanacharya Sammana, we call it Narayanacharya Sammana, started, and this is the third year we are doing. First year we gave that, we gave the Sammana to Sri Sandeep Balakrishna. Last year it was Sri Babu Krishnamurti, and this year it is going to be Sri Pradhan Gurudatta. So that is the Sammana Sabhe. So along with Sammana, we also wanted to conduct a Sabhe. So where people, scholars, talk about dharmic fields and dharmic topics and about Ramayana, Mahabharata. This is how it started, and this is how it went for 2 years. And then this year, somewhere around in April, so one of our mentors is Sri Pawan Gupta from Siddh, Masuri. So he said that I think you need to go to the next level now. So, and he said, you arrange a conference. He said, conference what? So one journey of Udhbhavaha is that we don't want to limit ourselves to an educational setup kind of a thing. So we want to go beyond the four walls of education and reach out to people, reach out to society. Whatever has been our learning and whatever the learnings of scholars has been, we want to get that to an ordinary India, ordinary Bharatiya. So this conference, I think that is also one of the context I want to say, that this, whatever we speak should reach and should touch the ordinary Bharatiya. I think we have a lot of academics conferences, but the masses, the regular people, ordinary people don't understand what happens usually in those kind of setups. And Narayanacharya was somebody who brought all those things to regular people. Like, I think if Narayanacharya was there today, we would have this auditorium full, and we would have whatever extra chairs we have put outside. I think that has to be brought in, and then that would, so that reaching to an ordinary Indian, how to reach all these things which we talk about to an ordinary Indian was a very important thing. So in that sense, Pawanji said that you start doing conference, you call scholars, let us have panel discussion, let us have scholarly topics, and we want to document this whole journey. One is that there will be a written documentation of the proceedings of both the days. We have video documentation also. And another, Pawanji inspired us to do this conference. He said, do this and let it reach ordinary Indians. And from last year, one person who has been with us in this journey is Sri Nilesh Okji. So when Nilesh Jogji said, when we were discussing, so I told him, so since he came last year, he understands what we do, and even he has visited Udhbhavaha, and we have had multiple interactions, and he said it should not just get limited to the talks which happen here. Something has to go beyond that also. And he said, let us make a 50-pager document, a 50-pager book. So the ongoing theme of Narayanacharya literature, we are also started calling the first day as Literature Festival and the concluding day as Narayanacharya Sammana Sabhe. So the from it is going to have an ongoing theme of education, which is going to, at least for next, I think we can see it for 3-4 years at least. And in that, subtopics is what we are choosing as theme for each literature festival, so each year. And this year we have chosen Itihasa as the theme. So then he said, can we write a 50-pager which can again reach to ordinary Indians, simple people, like we have, like by the virtue of going through the schooling, we know something, like we know Babar, that kind of a, we by default get something, we default start talking about something. Can this book be a primer like that, which will introduce people to how to look at Itihasa, what is history, what is myth, and a discussion which we are going to have, and also that is there a Bharatiya way of looking at the past. That is the context it is setting so that we get the perspective on how to look at our past. That is one thing. The second half of today is going to be about narratives which every Bharatiya should know. Because we know a few narratives by virtue of going through the schooling education. I think there are some things which every Bharatiya should know, and we have eminent speakers today, and that should also go into that book. So it introduces, and also if somebody is interested to go beyond that book and want to read, we'll have enough references for them to read those books. So that, and tomorrow we will be having a few talks and also Sammana to Sri Pradhan Gurudatji. So that is what we are planning to do. And Pawanji was supposed to be here. So Pawanji was supposed to be here, and because he initiated this thought of literature festival, and he could not be here, so because of some unavoidable reasons. So he has sent us a video to also set the context. So we'll play that video, and post that I'll call the panelists one by one and by introducing them, and then we can start our panel discussion. So that is the idea. So we'll play the video by Pawanji.
Namaskar to the learned audience, the speakers, and the organizers. I must thank the team of Udhbhavaha, Sahitya Prakashana, Subbu Publications, and Param Foundation for organizing this important event and giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts with you all. I'm sorry that despite my eagerness to attend the event, in the conception of which I have also played a small part, I have not been able to be present today. I hope the organizers, especially the Udhbhavaha team, will forgive me for this. I have been fortunate to have been associated with Udhbhavaha ever since, or rather, ever even before its inception, and have closely interacted with its core team, keenly observed how it has evolved over the years. It won't be an exaggeration to say I have been part of this interesting journey. It has been invigorating to observe their evolvement, their sincerity, enthusiasm, keenness to learn, experiment, and incorporate the learnings into action and see their struggles. Udhbhavaha is work in progress. Having been involved in the field of education myself for about 35 years, a field I entered thinking that there are only two ways of bringing about fundamental changes at the collective macro level. One being politics, for which I found myself completely unsuited, and education. I can say with some surety that I have rarely seen such sincerity, openness, eagerness to bring about a meaningful difference both within and without as I have seen here. It is not easy, especially in our country where all the problems that one imagines with education are compounded because of the legacy we carry from our colonial past. The disease which was inflicted upon from the beginning of 19th century still lingers on, sometimes taking different forms, some of them very alluring and misleading. Some issues have gotten so entrenched, not just outside in the systems, but in our own minds, in the manner in which we perceive and think. Hence, to get back to what must be sushiksha is not easy. We have to fight demons, not just outside, but within ourselves. The teachers, the parents, the students, and the society at large. It's not easy. A constant vigilance is required outside and constant awareness within. And then we must also navigate the labyrinth of outside systems, textbooks, curriculum, parents' expectations, teachers' conditioning, and students' skewed aspirations. The elites are everywhere in all countries, all societies. Nothing wrong with that. We too had our elites, but they were never so alienated from our cultural and civilizational moorings, from our noble ordinary, as they became after the beginning of the 19th century through the newly introduced colonial education, whose very objective was this: to create a new class of people totally deracinated, self-loathing, and ashamed of almost everything they could call their own. This disease that started almost 225 years ago has now engulfed almost our entire educated class. At the cost of sticking my neck out, I will say even those amongst us who feel this pain, this wound, those who are acutely aware of this problem, even they are not completely free of this deep-seated disease which has made its home in our drishti, which is the seat from where we perceive. So both the educator and the learner are afflicted by the same disease, the only difference hopefully being that one is aware, the other is not. This is the starting point from where we need to address this problem. Those who feel the pain of this more than 2 centuries old wound are our hope. There is another hope. No other country has this. The hope is our ordinary Bhartiyas, the ones we call uneducated, They are rooted, they have faith, which in all fairness and at the cost of sounding harsh, we the educated have lost. Or if not fully, then certainly our faith has become diluted with rationality and limited logic. Our rationality is mostly indoctrinated assumptions of which we are hardly aware. This ignorance is the arrogance of the educated. If we can start keenly observing our ordinary, who are yet noble, who still have a keen sense of aesthetics, and they mostly live a value-based life, we can feel truly proud of our great civilization. And if we feel that way, then we could perhaps draw the attention of our students to this nobility of the Bharatvarsh and its people, its heritage. This is the task of the new educator, the new Pathshala. Let me now touch upon a few issues which may be relevant to this two-day event. Education is for life, for living. To live a meaningful, healthy life, we need to know reality. We need to know the truth, the unchanging Sanatana, so that we can lead a life in alignment with that reality, with truth. Education must help us in this. Darshana is to see the reality, see the truth, the unchanging, the eternal, and the perennial. So it should be quite obvious that all teaching must be based on darshana. If so, all subjects which are basically a man-made category must be based on darshana. If so, integration between all subjects will happen naturally and education is bound to come closer to life. At present, what we have done is to turn darshana itself into a subject category. All subjects are man-made categories. Categories are meant for our convenience, like instruments and tools. But no instrument, tool, or categories subjects are value neutral. They have a force, an inherent tendency of their own. In other words, each one of them is value loaded and not neutral. Once we choose a category, a tool, or an instrument, it will influence our cognition, our perception. But we seem to have got caught into or bought into these Western subject and word categories. We are no longer even aware if these are our Bhartiya categories or Western categories, and we seem to have simply bought into them without being aware. So inadvertently, we get influenced by them. This brings me to the most important category of Itihāsa, myth, and history. They are all separate and distinct, and yet a confusion prevails, so much so that these three words are many times used as synonyms of one another. Itihāsa is not history, but more often than not, they are used as synonyms. Same is with Itihāsa and myth. This clarity needs to seep down in our education system as deep, as far as it can go. Otherwise, as often happens, Itihāsa is going to be subsumed by history, just as Dharma has been subsumed by religion. We have mistakenly assumed that the Western world has all that we have and more, whereas the reality is just the opposite. In the West, they have no equivalent to Itihāsa. But our Itihāsa has the capacity to engulf history. I hope we will have clarity about these distinctions by the end of two-day deliberations, and also have some idea of how to move forward. I am of the view that ability to make distinctions, bhedas, must be an important part of education. This brings me to my last and favorite point. Content is important, but equally important are subject categories and pedagogy. The manner in which we deliver. Not enough attention has been given to this. If at all new innovations have come from the West. All the playway methods, learning by doing, project work, etc., etc. We have not used the art of questioning for learning, only to elicit information. from the student. But questioning has been used in Bharat for dhyana-karshan, especially to the reality which is intangible. We need to think of ways, and there are many, to connect the inner of the student to the outer, what they are learning with what is the Sanatana. For this, we will certainly have to put effort into creating teachers who are keen learners themselves. I hope and wish all success to this two-day event. Thank you very much.
I think, like Pavanji was mentioning, I think we should start with this confusion we have. Confusion we have about these three words: Itihasa, history, and myth. That is something which I think we should discuss. And also, one main point which I want to come out of this discussion is there a Bharatiya way of looking at the past? So that is something, and I think Acharya, you can start with discussing about how does the Shastra. So what is the Shastric way of looking at this whole confusion? And I think over this discussion we'll also discuss about what happens when we have this wrong perspective of the past. When we confuse this thing, what is the effect? If there is no effect of confusion, then we better go ahead with whatever we have. So is there an effect, and what has happened to us because of this?
I am very, very much happy to participate in this dialogue to honor Professor K.S. Narayanacharya, because I hold him in high esteem and I had met him. And I remember one thing, the first time I met him and the conversation we had in 1991, he was writing the Acharya Chanakya in the Taranga weekly. It was a big novel. Of course, from the sources, he had made a novel, very interesting novel. I was very young guy, 18, 19 years. And I was very much annoyed by the way he narrated the history of Chanakya. Not the novel of Chanakya, but I was very much disturbed by the fact that he positioned Chanakya 327 BC, as everybody does in the history. That is to make him contemporary to the Alexander, or the later, a little bit later on from the Alexander. Alexander invaded India. Later on, there was a big need to integrate the whole of India. So Chanakya used Chandragupta to get such an integration of India. That was his theme. But myself, I was apprehensive of the date because I studied little English at the time. And I thought it is from the Puranic sources, and whatever the sources we have, our literary sources, I don't call historical sources or Puranic sources, but literary source we have is from the Mahabharata war. It is 1500 years where Nandas flourished, and this Chanakya, he uprooted the Nanda Vamsha and made Chandragupta as the emperor of the India. So he should be positioned around 1500 BC. So it was my view, and I went to Narayanacharya's house in Dharwad, Malola, myself and my friend Tirumalacharya, who was resident of Dharwad, and I told him, why you are writing this novel in this manner, you are positioning Chanakya in something different arena or different era. I told, why you are worried. I said, it is from our literary sources we know this thing. But he said, I am writing historically. And later he told, if you don't accept my sources, my history, my research, then you read your own history. And I told, yes, I will write what, and I will read and I will write what I believe. I will stick to my Puranas, and that was the first time I met. He was a little bit annoyed, as naturally young men speaking something not very pleasant. But later on, he was very much happy, and I had met him many times. And last time, when he was given Adikavi Valmiki Puraskara, he was very much happy that I am working in the university, and he remembered that thing. So, my perspective of Indian narrative is different from Acharya, Narayanacharya's narrative. That was my thought, but when I had to read his Veda Samskriti Parichaya later on, because I did not, I have read many of his Mahabharata, Ramayana and all other things, but I did not find it too much interesting. So later on, when I read the Veda Samskriti Parichaya, I understood his his own traditional viewpoint, and I accepted he was a great scholar, and his narrative is right at least in the Veda Samskriti Parichaya, where he wanted to interpret the Vedas in a right view. So it is my bhagya to be here to honor him. I hold him in high respect, that's why I am here. And to speak about what I spoke earlier also. What is the Indian perspective of writing about the past? If we see the Amarkosha, there is one very Itihasa. Normal name of the past narrative is the Itihasa, as we see in the contemporary society, and also as we see in our last 2000 years something narrative or literary sources. Amarkosha says, Itihasa puravrattam, Itihasa puravrattam. Whatever has happened earlier, pura earlier, vrittam happened things, they are called as Itihasa. So is it true? I don't think it is true. That's why we are in this discourse how to distinguish this Itihasa from Puravratta. There is one more definition of unknown selves, but I think it is more likely and very interesting to note. Dharmartha kama mokshanam upadesha samanvitam puravrattam purvavrattam kathayuktam itihasam prachakshate. The Itihasa is the thing which narrates how to live our life. It should include all the dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Dharma, artha, kama, mokshanam upadesha samanvitam. So the Mahabharata, which is now we accept as the Itihasa, is a Itihasa because it has got yadihasti tadanyatra yannihasti nadat kvachit. It includes all the dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And it includes the Purvavratta also. Purvavrattam kathayuktam. And there are many stories in between which may be true, which may not be true. That's why they are distinguishing Purvavrattam kathayuktam. Purvavratta, whatever happened earlier, it is Purvavratta. And in between there are so many stories to narrate, to convey the message. That is the Itihasa. In that manner, we can accept both Mahabharata and Ramayana and all other Puranas as Itihasa. Though there is a clear distinction between the Itihasa and Purana from the very early age. Itihasa Purana Panchama Vedanam Vedaha. Itihasa is different and Purana is different. But in this sense, we can think everything, all our, mostly the 18 Puranas and Mahabharata, Ramayana and all other things are Itihasas. So can we find such a reference to the Purvavratta and Itivrutta in the Mahabharata? That is also very interesting. Mahabharata itself says so. And there is a Akhyayika also, Akhyayika part. Akhyayika is also very interesting to know. I will come back to Akhyayika again to make my point very clear. At the very beginning of the Mahabharata, we find these verses. Purana samhita punyaha katha dharmartha samshritaha. Purana samhitaha, these are all very old kathas. Dharmartha samshritaha. I am going to tell you the stories which are intermixed with all this dharma and artha and all other things. And punya, they are all very auspicious and very important that will clear all our problems in the life. And he says, Itivruttam Narendranam Rishinancha Mahatmanam. I will also tell you Itivrutta of our old rishis. Itivruttam Maharshina, Narendranam, both. I will tell rishis Itivrutta and also the Narendras, the kings, emperors Itivrutta. So Mahabharata itself is clearly differentiating both this Itihasa and Itivrutta. So the Itihasa, it includes each and everything that we need to lead our life. How to lead our life, how to balance between Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, and to understand the life, the sorrows, the happiness of the life and the difficulties of the life. That's why Mahabharata is so big. It includes everything. That's why in that way we can distinguish this Itihasa and Itivrutta. That's why Mahabharata and again it makes it very clear that I am not going to simply narrate the history, what happened. I am going to tell what should happen to the humans. In that way, we can call it as Bhavishyat also, not only Itihasa. So it says, Sukshmartha Nyaya Yuktasya Vedarthehi Bhushitasya cha. See, again it says, Sukshmartha Nyaya. There are very subtle points, very Nyayas of Nyaya Shastra. Reasoning and logic and understanding of the life. Vedarthe Bhushitasya. Again, whole Vedartha is included in the Mahabharata. That's why Bharatakya Itihasasya Punyam Granthartha Sanyutam. It says, it is including all these things. That's why it is called as Itihasa. Not only simply it is Itihasa. And when we find one more very interesting thing, Itihasa pradipena mohavarana ghatina lokagarbha graham krasnam yathavat samprakashitam. One of the very favorite quotations from the Mahabharata. This Mahabharata is not simply old story, happened stories. It is mohavarana ghatina. It is to clear our illusions of the life. Mohavarana ghatina. That's why we have made this Mahabharata. So he is very clear. Then what will be the effect of the Mahabharata, reading Mahabharata? It is also very clear. It is not simply reading stories and going to office. Itihasa uttamadasmat jayante kavi buddhayaha. If you read Mahabharata, your perception will be very clear. You will become a jnani, not simply poet. It is jayante kavi buddhayaha. And anashritya idamakhyanam katha bhuvi navidyate. There will be no story in this world without the Mahabharata Itihasa, because it includes each and everything of the life. And he gives a very interesting analogy. Ahara manapashritya sharirasya dharanam. Like without food you cannot sustain, your body will not sustain. In the same manner, without Mahabharata, this whole life will not sustain. And if you read Mahabharata, muchyate sarva papebhyaha rahuna chandrama yatha. Jayo nama itihasoyam shrotavyo vijigishuna. And he says, Itihasam imam shrutva purushopi sudarunaha muchyate sarva papebhyaha. It is the essence of the whole Mahabharata. What will happen if you read Mahabharata? even the cruelest person will be cleansed of all his sins if he reads Mahabharata. That is the very clear message. In Mahabharata is not simply a story of old. So there is a story of old as well as the Upadesha, how to lead the life, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. That is the essence of Mahabharata. In that way, we can understand Itihasa is different, Itivrutta is different, and then history, modern history, we can call it as Itivrutta. But somehow, maybe last 200 years, I don't know exactly how Itihasa word is used in our Sanskrit literature. The modern literature, in all Indian languages, we use Itihasa to mean history. But that is not true, as we see from the Mahabharata quotations. So, to distinguish Itihasa from Itivrutta, it is very important. And then there is very important thing is to understand or differentiate between the Akyayikas and Itihasa, Akhyayikas and Itivrutta. For example, in the Bhagavata, the first, very beginning of the Bhagavata, we see Naimishe Nimisha Kshetre Rishaya Shaunakadayaha Rishayaha Sahasra Samamasata. They started 1000 years yaga. And in that yaga, Bhagavata was narrated to all these rishis by this Suta. Is it possible to have 1000 years yaga even according to the Indian standards in the Kali Yuga? If it is in the Dwapara Yuga or Treta Yuga, then we can accept, because Dwapara Yuga Pramana is different and the Treta Yuga Pramana is different, then we can understand it is okay, 100,000 years yaga, Hiranyakashipu did tapasya for 10,000 years, something that is acceptable. But in the Kali Yuga, normally it is the Ayuh Pramana is only 100 years, and how these rishis can perform 1000 years yaga. So here is a caution. It is an Akhyayika to make clear that even if you do 1000 years of yaga, your papas will not be cleansed. Your sins will not be clear. So you have to listen to the Bhagavata. That's why Akhyayika pradarshiyante tatparya dyotanaya iva. It is to only emphasize on the story or the importance of the narrative that is going to happen. These Akhyayikas are narrated. So these Akhyayikas you don't believe. You don't need to take it as they are. That is very important thing. And in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, everywhere we see there are many things that are narrated, like many animals and birds are speaking to each other and they are narrating Dharma and all other things. Can we take them as happened? Because there is a tendency in our society that we believe it is literally true. All the Mahabharata is literally true. Or Ramayana, Purana, everything is narrated very clear, very true. There is no need to doubt it. So then we will have to accept that all these animals, birds, they were all speaking and they were teaching Dharma and all other things. No, it is not something. Grahya nartha kathanchana. There we need to take the story, morale of the story or the intention of the story, rather than taking them as very clear as it is. This is caution given by Madhvacharya. Though Madhvacharya, he has narrated the whole story of Mahabharata and Ramayana, but he believes that it happened. Mahabharata and Ramayana happened. And we also believe Rama was there and Krishna was there and he killed all these Kamsa and all other people. Everything happened. We believe. But there is no need to believe all the things in the Mahabharata, because some of them are Akhyayika, some of them are moral stories. That there we need to have a kind of differentiation or distinction or caution that we should have in our mind. This is my view of Itihasa, Itivrutta, Akhyayika, Puranas. And there is more to speak about Arthavada of Mimamsakas. They have literally killed it, making it is not all true. Whereas our traditional view of Vedas, that does not hold so. There is a view of Mimamsakas. Vidhi, mantra, namadheya, arthavada, these are the parts of Veda. Only Vidhi is Jyotishtvameena Suraga Kamaha Yajeta. That is true, that is valid, that is acceptable as representing the two fact. We should perform the Jyotishtoma Yaga and we will have the Swarga Phala. What about the stories? No, these stories are all waste. They don't have any pramanya. They are not real. This is the viewpoint of Mimamsakas. That is not acceptable. It is a myth. Because there is only Vedic literature. We have to understand Vedic literature. Whole Vedic Sahitya we should understand. It is not only simply restricted to Vedanta. That is one false notion, but that is not the present area. So Vedas, in the Aitareya Brahmana, we see there are so many kings, they performed this Mahabhisheka and they became the emperors of the India, and Marutta and Avikshita, Bharata, Daushanti. So many kings are there. They are the Itivruttas. There is no logic or reason to believe it is all fictional. So in that way, we should have some kind of caution or discretion while speaking, while thinking about Itihasa and all things. Thanks for this opportunity.
I think we're able to make more distinctions now. Itihasa andrenu, Itivrutta andrenu. And one thing, when he was sharing that, when we read Itihasa, we get Gnana. I think we read history, we get Ajnana only. Today, what is happening with all of us getting exposed to what is taught to us as history, I think most of it is Ajnana only. So, thank you.